This video provides my update on the war in Ukraine and issues a warning to Germany and China against a direct attack on Russia. Hello friends, this is Unmasked Truth with Harmanjit Saini, where I provide unique analysis of world events based on the unmasked truth that after surrender, Germany continued World War II clandestinely and became a killing machine. I also provide true news that you will find nowhere else. Now we have entered the third month of the war in Ukraine. Though some cities in Ukraine have been destroyed, the Ukrainians are fighting back and holding their own. They successfully forced Russia to retreat from around the capital, Kyiv, which is now concentrating on taking the east and south of the country. In the beginning of the war, it seemed within a couple of weeks Russia would take the capital, Kyiv, remove the Zelensky regime, and denazification and demilitarization of Ukraine being the stated goal of President Putin or Russia's special operations. U.S. Secretaries of Defense and State Lloyd Austin and Antony Blinken visited Ukraine over the past weekend and conferred with President Zelensky and his team. After the meeting, Secretary Austin said, "They, that is the Ukrainians, believe that they can win. We believe that they can win if they have the right equipment, the right support, and we are going to do everything we can and continue to do everything we can." Secretary Austin stated, "We want to see Russia weaken to the degree that it can't do the kinds of things that it has done in invading Ukraine." Austin also stated, "It has already lost a lot of military capability and a lot of its troops, quite frankly, and we want to see them not have the capability to very quickly reproduce that capability." The US, in concert with allies after a meeting of 40 nations in Berlin, seems to have made a firm commitment to Ukraine to supply all necessary weapons to prevent Russia from gaining a total victory. Since they all oppose Russia for violating Ukraine's territorial integrity, it seems that the war will continue as long as Russian troops are on Ukrainian soil. At the same time, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken told journalists that Russia was failing in Ukraine and that Ukraine is succeeding. That is quite evident from the massive amounts of Russian armored vehicles and tanks destroyed by Ukrainian forces. Promise of supply of even deadlier weapons will be a further morale booster for Ukrainian soldiers. They can continue the war indefinitely if the supply of weapons continues to materialize. Germany stood on the sidelines for the past 2 months since the war started. It did not need to do anything as German masqueraders in the United States, Britain, and other European nations were bending over backwards to supply much of what Ukraine needed. But now Germany has decided to supply heavy equipment such as infantry fighting vehicles and anti aircraft tanks. This deadly firepower will mean continuing greater losses of equipment and soldiers for Russia. Secretary Blinken also said, "We don't know how the rest of this war will unfold, but we do know that a sovereign, independent Ukraine will be around a lot longer than Vladimir Putin is on the scene." Meanwhile, Pentagon Press Secretary John Kirby's assessment of Russia was that its economy is in tatters, its military has been depleted in many ways, not completely, but certainly they have suffered casualties and they have suffered losses in this invasion of Ukraine. He also said, "We want Russia not to be able to threaten their neighbors again in the future." Thus, the United States and its allies seem to have assessed that the war will continue as long as Russia has forces in Ukraine, and they will continue to supply weapons to Ukraine in sufficient quantities to fend off Russian forces, while its stockpile of weapons and war making capability continues to degrade. With the technology and economic sanctions in place, Secretary Austin has assessed that Russia will likely not have the ability to reproduce its war making capability. Now, NATO and Western nations in their thinking seem to have cornered the Russian bear. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, responding to the situation, said in a Russian state TV interview, "NATO, in essence, is engaged in a war with Russia through a proxy, and is arming that proxy. War means war. He said that the war could escalate into a global conflict with nuclear weapons. He stated, "The risk is serious, real. It should not be underestimated. Under no circumstances should a third world war be allowed to happen. There can be no winners in a nuclear war." Clearly, by assuring Ukraine of a supply of sophisticated weapons, NATO is prolonging the war. Russia has no choice but to continue fighting to prevent Germany from installing nuclear weapons and developing biological and chemical weapons in Ukraine. Russia has taken the next steps in the war by stopping gas supplies to Poland and Bulgaria for not paying for the gas in rubles. Russia has also assessed that its showing in the war so far has probably given Germany and China other ideas. Though their primary goal is to attack United States, British Commonwealth nations and Israel, that is Germany and China's goal, they are now tempted to think Russia now directly they are not tempted to think Russia now presents a relatively easy target. So they are thinking of directly intervening in the war by sending Chinese and German troops, or more likely using nuclear weapons against Russia. They hope to defeat Russia, put Nazis in power, and plunder Russian assets. That is most likely the reason why Russia's President Putin and Foreign Minister Lavrov had to warn other countries about the risk of a nuclear war. President Putin warned of retaliation if countries interfere in the war in Ukraine. He said in a St. Petersburg, Russia interview, "If someone intends to intervene in the ongoing events from the outside and create strategic threats for Russia that are unacceptable to us, they should know that our retaliatory strikes will be lightning fast. We have all the tools for this, things no one else can boast of having now. And we will not boast, we will use them if necessary. And I want everyone to know that." It's worthwhile to consider how Germans make their war calculations. They pay a great deal of attention to Bible prophecy. Bible prophecy tells us that the Germans will sometime in the near future succeed in defeating the United States, British Commonwealth and nations, and Israel. However, within 3.5 years after that, they and Europe will be hammered by a 200 million strong army, as Revelation 9:16 indicates. Now the number of the army of the horsemen was 200 million. I heard the number of them. Now this 200 million man from army from the east will hammer the Germans and Europeans, and the army will be headed by Russia and other eastern nations, as Daniel 11 verse 44 indicates. But tidings out of the east and out of the north, meaning northeast, where lies Russia and other countries of the east, shall trouble him, that is the king of the north or the German dictator. Now I find the German antics amusing in trying to fulfill prophecy in their own way. God had revealed to me through a message delivered by an angel an important sequence in end time events. It concerns the prophecy in Daniel 11 verses 40 to 43, which state, "And at the time of the end shall the king of the south, which is a Middle East and African power, shall the king of the south push at him, and the king of the north, which is the European power headed by Germany, shall come against him like a whirlwind with chariots and with horsemen and with many ships. And he shall enter into the countries and shall overflow and pass over. He shall enter also into the glorious land," meaning the land of Israel and Jerusalem, "and many countries shall be overthrown. But these shall escape out of his hand, even Edom and Moab, and the chief of the children of Ammon." Edom is Turkey, and Moab and Ammon are the Jordanians. "He shall stretch forth his hand also upon the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape the king of the north or the German dictator. But he shall have power over the treasures of gold and of silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt, and the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall be at his steps." According to the message delivered to me, this war between the King of the North and the King of the South takes place after the defeat of the United States, Britain, and Israel alliance. Before this message, the understanding of God's church of this prophecy was that this war takes place before the European attack on the United States, Britain, and Israel. Now, despite the message to me, Germany tried many times to fulfill this prophecy according to the previous understanding. They have been propping up Islamic dictators like Saddam Hussein and after that ISIS. After propping them up as king of the south, their hope was then to attack the ruler under the guise of defending Israel, thus fulfilling the Daniel 11 verses 40 to 43 prophecy. Then they would attack the United States, Britain, and Israel alliance. They coaxed Saddam Hussein to conquer the Islamic world by first conquering Iran. That fell through. Then they asked him to begin with Kuwait. That attempt fell through after the United States defeated Iraq in the first Gulf War. Then Saddam Hussein was defeated in the second Gulf War and was hanged. That attempt to prop him up as the king of the South failed. ISIS was another attempt to set up a king of the South, which Germany would attack and destroy, and then attack the United States, Britain, and Israel. However, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, leader of ISIS, was also killed, and much of ISIS destroyed, and the survivors booted out of Iraq and Syria. This attempt to fulfill prophecy in their own way, contrary to the message delivered to me by an angel, also failed. Now assessing that Russian military is already weakened and that they can easily defeat it, Germany and China have got new ideas. They are planning to attack Russia directly so that Germany does not have to worry about a 200 million man army of the East headed by Russia and other kings of the East attacking and destroying Germany and the Europeans later. I find these antics amusing because the Germans have not learned from the past. Their attempts to fulfill prophecy in their own way or prevent prophecy from being fulfilled keeps falling flat on their faces. They think they can take advantage of what God prophesies when it suits them. When it does not suit them, they can then beat God at his own game with Satan's help whenever it suits their purpose. Perhaps Germany and China have been emboldened to attack Russia because of the support they have received from 40 nations in the meeting in Berlin, which have all pledged support for Ukraine to stop Russia's aggression. But let me give Germany and China a dose of reality. It's not a secret that there are two nations within America and Britain, one headed by German masqueraders in both countries and the other by whites of non-German descent. Germany and China have the support of the nations within our nations headed by German masqueraders in our countries in their war with Russia. In fact, the US announced a request for a new $33 billion aid package for Ukraine. Germany does not have to do much on its own. It simply signals to German masqueraders in our country and they bend over backwards to allow US money to be looted for whatever purpose Germany wants. In this case, aid to Ukraine to continue the war. But the real other America and Britain will not stand idly by. We will come to Russia's aid. Let me issue this warning to Germany, other European powers, and China. A direct attack on Russia by you will invite immediate retaliation from America, British Commonwealth nations, even preemptorily. We will simply not let you attack Russia directly and get away with it. And such a direct attack means a nuclear war. Perhaps Russia is fully capable of dealing with the nuclear threat from China and Germany. But we in America will not wait to find out. It will be a war between Russian, American, and British nuclear weapons on one side against German and Chinese nuclear weapons on the other. Germans and Chinese, you live in a fool's paradise if you think we will allow you to gang up together and pick us off one by one. I can assure you that we will view a direct attack on Russia as a direct attack on us, that is, the United States and Britain and Israel. We will have to fight both Russia. You will have to fight both Russia and the United States, the British and the Israeli alliance. I counsel President Putin and Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov to take heart. Continue doing what you are doing in Ukraine to denazify the country. We understand that you are doing it because the Germans are attempting to install nuclear weapons there and develop biological and chemical weapons in Ukraine to be used against Russia. You have launched your special operations to neutralize this existential threat. We fully support you in this endeavor. Nothing in prophecy indicates that Russia will be destroyed in any war, but will remain a great power to fulfill Revelation 9 verse 16 and be one of the leaders of the 200 million man army of the Eastern Alliance. So I would like to caution Germany and China against any adventurism against Russia. Let me assure Germany, China, and Modi's India that the first stop in your road to world domination will have to be the District of Columbia. You try it anywhere else, we will intervene to stop you. I would like nations to understand who is working to bring the world under its boot and who is working to prevent that from happening so that nations remain free. Germany and China have given nuclear weapons to North Korea and India, hoping that they would use them to start Third World War so that they can watch and assess if they want to get in and attack the United States, Britain, and Israel. They were in the process of of installing nuclear weapons in Ukraine to use against Russia to keep Russia engaged in war so that they can concentrate on winning the war against the United States, Britain, and Israel. If the threat of US intervention were not present, China and Germany would have occupied Venezuela a long time ago. China would have enslaved Southeast Asia. It is the US military might that is keeping nations free, while Germany and China are trying to enslave them, bring them under their boot, and loot their mineral and agricultural resources. Prophecy indicates that Germany and its allies will succeed in defeating and enslaving the United States, Britain, British Commonwealth nations, and Israel alliance. After that, they will literally loot the wealth of nations. The world will experience oppression like it has never experienced before in its history. Jesus Christ described this oppression as the Great Tribulation in Matthew 24, verse 21. For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. But till that time, the world should recognize that it is the United States, Britain, and Israel which are keeping nations free. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please continue to watch my videos and read my articles on important world events, World War III watch, politics, international business, advice on health and medical problems, and much more for in-depth and insightful analysis. Please also subscribe to my YouTube and Facebook channels Unmasked Truth with Harmanjit Saini to view and get information on the latest videos. Some people do not have the time to go through the full length of videos. They find it more convenient to read the text of the video. Unfortunately, YouTube does not provide the facility to make the text of my videos available on YouTube on demand. But fortunately, Facebook does provide that facility, so I make the text of my videos available on my Facebook channel, which you can easily copy.